Alright, let's take what we made in part 1 and render it out in cycles. So at the top you can see we're currently in Blender Render. I'm going to click that and change it to cycles. Currently we don't have any light in our scene, so if you hit Shift Z right now to see what's being rendered, we're not getting too much. Hit Shift Z to go out of that. I'm going to hit 7 on the number pad to go into the top view. I'm going to hold Shift and hit A, go down and add a sun. I'm going to go in this far right panel and change the size to 0.03. This is just going to control the shadows and how they look, and I found that with the scene we've got going, 0.03 works well, and the strength I'm going to change to 5. I'm just going to drag this over on Y to make it a little bit more clear where the sun's pointing. I'm going to 3 to go into my side view, and I'm just going to hit R to rotate this. So I want the shadow to kind of go down below the 5, so I'm going to go to about there. Actually, I'm going to hit R maybe a little bit more. And I'm going to go back in my top view 7, and we also want the shadow to go to the left. So I'm going to pull it that way. And let's hit 0 to go into our camera view, Shift Z, and we can see. So, you may like that. You may think that's pretty good. I'm going to do a little more tinkering here. I'm going to hit Shift Z. I'm just going to go back to my top view, hit R, and just make it a little bit, point maybe there. 3 to go my side view, and R a little lower. 0 to go back to my camera, Shift Z. And yeah, I'm happy with that. So I'm going to leave the sun there, Shift Z to go out of the rendered view. Now we're going to start adding the materials. So I'm going to right click on this middle panel. This one we're going to use some image textures to make it look kind of like the wood floor on a basketball court. So with it selected, I'm going to go down to the bottom left here and change it from 3D view to node editor if I can find it. So there we go. And currently we don't have any material added, so in the furthest right panel I'm going to go ahead and click new. And I'm just going to click this diffuse right here and change it to the principled shader. Okay, so now I'm going to hit Shift A, hit that search. I'm just going to type in image texture. I'm going to put one here, and I know we're going to need 2 more, so I'm going to hit Shift D and add in a couple more. And by the way, if you want someone to go a little bit more in depth explaining what we're doing here, if you go to that Polygon website where we got these image textures, you can find on the website more detailed, what we're doing and why. But for the matters of this tutorial, I'm just going to show you exactly how to connect it up. So this first image texture is going to go into the base color. I'm going to click Open, go into the folder with the texture and click on this color. Okay, the second one is going to go into the roughness. So I'm going to click Open, go into that texture, and I'm going to click on the gloss. And we're going to change color right here to non-color data. Okay, the last one down here, I'm going to drag it and connect to the normal. That's also going to be non-color data. Let's click Open here, and this one is going to be the normal. Alright, so now I'm going to hit Shift A, click that search, type in invert, and I'm just going to hover above here, click it, Shift A, search, normal. We want this normal map. I'm going to hover over here and click it there, and now I'm going to change the strength up to 10. Hit enter. And I think we've got everything set up properly. So I'm going to go into our 3D view, hit Shift Z, and so we have it set up properly, but it looks strange right now, and that's just because we haven't actually unwrapped this object yet. So let me hit Shift Z to go out of that. So now we actually need to unwrap it so that it looks right. So I'm going to hit N to give myself some more space, and I'm going to drag over another viewport here. And we're going to change this one to the UV image editor. And right here we have the little icon of the picture. I'm going to go ahead and just click on the colored one, zoom out a little bit. And with my mouse in the left viewport here, I'm going to tap into edit mode and make sure you have nothing selected. If you need to hit A, do so. And I'm going to hold Shift and Alt and right click in between right here. That's going to select that whole top line. I'm going to hit Enter, type in Mark Seam. And I'm not going to go in depth about UV unwrapping here. I'm just going to do a very basic one just to make this work. Feel free to look into that more to see what we're doing here and the proper ways to do it. A to deselect. I'm going to Shift, Alt, right click here. Spacebar, click Mark Seam. A to deselect. Shift, Alt, right click here. Spacebar, Mark Seam. A to deselect. Shift, Alt, right click. Spacebar, Mark Seam. So now we've got all these seams marked. I'm going to click A twice and that's going to select everything. I'm going to hit U and unwrap. So in this right panel here, now you can see how this unwrap actually is being laid onto this texture. I'm gonna, with my mouse on the left side, hit Shift Z, and if you look now, this texture actually looks good. And you could play with the scale. If you have your mouse over here, you can hit S and change the scale up. But I actually think I like what we're looking at here. And I'm gonna zoom back out. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. So I'm gonna hit Shift Z to go out of the rendered view. Alright, so that one's done, so I'm going to tab out of edit mode there, and we're not going to do any more unwrapping, so I'm just going to click and hold here and just close that window out. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and for the rest of them it's just going to be simple colors. So I'm going to right click on this top panel, and I'm going to click New, and by default it adds the diffuse, and really for this project that's going to work just fine. So I'm going to click the white here, just make it a red, and the top panel is going to be red. I'll right click on this bottom panel. You can click here and just reuse that same red material. And these three middle ones are going to be red too. So I'm just going to right click on the object and change it to red. Okay, so those are all red now. And I want this top one, give it a new material, change it to blue. Right click on the bottom one, change that material to blue. Hit Shift Z. And that's good, except for I forgot we need to do this number here. I'm going to hit Shift Z to go out of here. And the white is fine for the middle part of the 5. But I'm going to right click on the outer part. And I'm going to go ahead and change make a new material. And I'm just going to make it a bit of a darker gray. See what we think about this. I think that's pretty good. You can go ahead and play with these however you want. I'm just going to jump to the first frame, see how it looks. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to hit Shift Z to go out of that. You'll see right now, actually I'm going to hit Shift C so you can see it's rendered again. In the final version I had, it had black back here. So what I actually did to achieve that, I actually went to this World tab, used nodes, and I gave it a color of blue. This is kind of arbitrary, and you don't necessarily follow along with this, but this overall color is going to affect this scene here. And actually, now that I see it, I'm not loving how that blue is working. So maybe something a lot more faint. So you may be perfectly happy with it like this. If you want it black, just know it will darken your scene up. So, you could go with something in between. You could do something more interesting altogether. But I think for the sake of keeping it simple, I'm just going to leave it right here. And just to show you a little bit more, I'm going to just click to a few different spots, and you can see how it's looking. And I think that looks pretty good. So I'm going to hit Shift Z and go out of that rendered view. Okay, and to render this out, we're going to do it as an image sequence. You could do it as a video file, but depending on your settings, each frame is going to take a while, so it's a long process. So it's a much better idea, rather than actually just exporting a movie straight out of here video file, is to do an image sequence, so that if it gets stopped at any point in the process, or if you need to render it over the course of a few days, you can do that. So if you go into this far right panel, click on the little camera. This is where we can set up our settings here. So this resolution, I'm gonna go ahead and put this up to 100%. You can also change the aspect ratio of this using these, but I'm gonna leave it as so. You can even go up to 150%, 200%. It's really up to you and what your computer can handle. So at this step, it really largely has to do with what your computer can handle. So it's just good to do some testing. So, you could say, for example, the main things you want to look at are this resolution, what you can render it out at, and the sampling. So right now it's at 128. I'll say maybe put up to like 400, and a good idea is to then hit F12, and it's just going to start rendering out that frame. So what you can do is figure out how long that frame takes and then multiply it by the 96 frames that this project is, and you can kind of figure out if that's going to be doable for you or if that's way too big. So I'm going to hit escape twice just to get out of that. So this samples is going to make a big difference in your render time, so play with that number and figure out what's going to work for you. Also, if you have the more recent version of Blender, you have denoising. Just go ahead and click that. You're going to get better quality with less samples, so you might as well just go ahead and use that. And yeah, so that's really going to be it. It's just your resolution, your samples, and there's other tips and tricks to lower render times that you can look up online, but for this I'm just going to leave it here. So what we really need to care about at this point is where it's going to go. So I'm going to click on this folder and go to my desktop, just for example, and you want to put it in a folder because there's going to be a lot of images here. So I'm just going to say sports bumper animation. Okay, and I'm going to go into that, and I'm just going to give it a name, sports bumper. You can name it whatever you want, and then underscore. Just going to hit accept a couple times, and then once you have everything set up, you just go ahead and click this animation button, and it's going to start rendering out frame by frame until you have a finished project.